What's up, guys? It's the Dirt Bike Channel podcast. This is Kyle Brotherson here. It is a wonderful, blustery day here in Utah, and I have the man, the myth, the legend, Rich Larsen with me. Rich, say hi, say hello to the people here.
What's up, guys? I am stoked to be on again.
Oh, man, this is my first repeat guest.
Yeah.
Rich was the number one guest. He was the first guest I've ever had, which makes him the number one forever and ever. So thank you so much for coming back on.
Dude, I am honored to be on again. I gotta say, before we start, everything you've done, man, you're killing the game with obviously the YouTube channel, the Instagram, and now the podcast. Everything you put out, you hammer down. You're putting it out constantly. Dude, I respect it so much. And yeah, man, I am honored to be the first guest and then the first repeat guest. And
Absolutely.
I'm stoked to be back on.
Well, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, and
Yeah.
that's how I look at this. No, for me, it's just about, the daily grind and just keep doing it. I'm not the best at anything. I've never been the best at anything, but one thing I am is I'm consistent.
Dude,
And
100%. That's the name of the game with anything, whether it's social media, marketing, whatever you're pushing. If you just constantly do it, and and that goes for writing right there. It's all about just constantly doing it. It's all about putting in the time. There is natural talent and that kind of stuff, but I'll tell you what, man, hard work trumps it all.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, if you're going to be like the utmost top of any profession, you have to have something different in your DNA that
Big time.
helps in that thing. But if you don't have the work ethic, you're not going to be there.
Yep.
I mean, even this week, I was with the passing of Kobe Bryant, not to
Sure.
put a Debbie Downer on
yeah,
things,
yeah.
but it really put it in perspective where, okay, that guy had some physical gifts, but the reason why he was who he was is
Yep.
because no one outworked him.
Right. The Mamba mentality, right?
He worked harder than anyone else, and it's like a huge loss. And it makes me wonder how many other people out there are like a Kobe Bryant,
man.
or like a Graham Jarvis, or like a,
Yeah, totally.
Ricky Carmichael, but
dude.
that don't put in the effort and don't put in the time, and that talent that they actually have got wasted. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there like that.
I when you say Ricky Carmichael, that's one of those ones that I loved hearing the old stories of Ricky and how he came up. And I remember watching the '99 season, and that was his amateur season on the 250, and he like blew out his leg, and it was kind of a struggle. And then 2000 he got a couple wins, and then 2001 it was like that was the change of the sport. It was like, Ricky's here, fun's over. It's no more hanging out in Havasu. Now it's straight up training
It's work.
all the time, and that changed the game.
Change the sport, right?
Yep, 100%. And it was all about how hard that dude worked.
The guys at Jeremy McGrath are like, I'm glad I
Yeah,
came just before
yeah,
you,
exactly.
because
He
I
was
don't know.
having a good time.
I don't know if I would have wanted to work as hard as you do now. And now you look at those Supercross riders. We're big time Supercross fans
Yeah,
here at my
100%.
house, and I look at the actual work that they have to put in, and I'm like, no, thank you.
Oh,
Like,
dude, it's unreal. I mean, just for me personally, I'm going to chase the whole extreme enduro season here in the United States, and hopefully do Aresburg this year. I'm trying to do as much extreme stuff as I can, racing stuff as I can, as well as all the media stuff that I do as well. I push so hard, and I want to be the best rider I can be, and to be as good as Cody or Colton or the best that the United States has to offer, I'm just like, I can't. I don't know how. I don't have enough time. I need 36-hour days to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, and you've got to have some support, from other people, other
That's
entities.
true. Yeah, 100%.
I mean, you're a family man. You've got a wife. You've got obligations. You have
Big time.
health insurance that you have to go out and work for, and it's a tough thing. But I've loved kind of watching your career from the sidelines, and what I said before we started recording is just that I think that you have some potential that a lot of other riders don't have because of your passion for teaching and how you get it. You're like, you know what, I'm okay with working hard, and I will, if I have a sponsor or I bring on a sponsor, I'm totally okay with doing more for them than they do for me.
Sure.
And I think that is going to extend your career in this sport more so than the other guy who's like, oh, I just need to get mine.
Yeah, man. When you say the teaching side of things too, especially that, man, for the sponsor thing, like I've always been that kind of guy. Like, okay, if you're going to support me, because I'm riding a dirt bike, right? So I get to ride a dirt bike. It's the raddest thing ever. It's, for a job, that's pretty sweet. to be able to ride a dirt bike for a job, I'm stoked about it. So if you're going to help me accomplish that, then I'm going to do 10 times as much for you than you're doing for me. That's the way that I've done it. And it's actually worked really well for me because, now I'm making a living doing it. But a big thing, and you specifically said teaching, right? I love teaching. It's really fun to me. It helps me as a writer too, because putting it into words, I see different people learn things in a different way. It helps me put it into words in my own mind. It helps me think about those specific things that I need to do when I'm writing, when I'm trying to, dial in a new technique, learning how to put them into words so people can understand them. Some people learn different from other people, so I have to, adjust for each person. But in teaching, I want to, if you're going to come out, and I'll tell you right now, I do lessons here locally. I've been doing a lot of lessons lately, and it's, really easy. If you just hit me up on Instagram or whatever, Rich Larsen 511, I'll gladly do a lesson for you. It's $100. That's my flat rate.
It's way underpriced.
And I know. And that's where it goes back to that. I will do 10 times for you what you do for me. So if you pay me, I'm going to give you a full day, and I promise you will ride until you don't want to ride anymore.
Is it a full day, or is it just tell the people can't ride
that's
anymore?
What it is.
Because
what I'm banking on.
I spent a couple hours with Rich, and I'm telling you, okay, first off, it was the best $100 I've ever spent in dirt bikes. Like, that is straight up, hands down.
Dude,
I've ridden with Graham Jarvis. I've ridden with Shane Watts. I've ridden with Rich. I've ridden with Max Gersten. I didn't pay Max. It wasn't a training thing. But the point is, I've spent money before on training, and I've spent a lot of money in dirt bikes.
Yeah.
I spent $100 with you in the summer of, last summer, and I need to do it again, and it actually changed my riding. Now, it didn't transform my riding, but it changed how I ride.
Right.
And for $100, nothing else has done that.
Dude.
Just the one thing, like, hey, if you remember one thing, I'm going to show you how to get unstuck. And it's just these simple little things.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, every single time. Just on Friday, 3-4 days ago, I was riding, I'm out testing the Beta 300, and I got it kind of stuck between two rocks, and I'm like, what would Rich do?
Yeah, there you go.
Rich would roll it back
Dialed.
2 inches.
Dialed.
Or 3 inches,
Yeah.
and then get up over the thing.
Dude,
so.
That is super high praise, man. I really, really appreciate that. And I hope that everybody that I teach, I can kind of, do that same thing. I try to make sure that everybody that comes out and rides with me, they have a good time. They learn something new. If even if it's just one thing, it's so rad when I've had a lot of new guys come out lately, and like when they come out and they get into certain stuff, and it's getting tough, and then I explain one thing just right, and I see it click in their mind. It's like their eyes light up, and they're like, "Oh, I see what you're saying. It's working." That feeling is awesome to me. I'm like, I love teaching for that reason.
Yeah, and I would say that because some of the people listening to this are going to actually hit Rich up and take this training. I know that.
Yeah.
When you do that, here's what I would suggest. Go in with a totally open mind, just be a sponge, and then after it's over, you're going to be sweating and you're going to be exhausted. What I would ask you to do is go home and or immediately maybe jot down some notes. Jot down some notes in something that won't get lost. I have my notes in my note program, and I'll go back and I'll review that. While it's fresh, just think about all the little things that he taught you and write that down. Because if you don't, you will forget it. And then in a month, I want you to go back and review that. And 2 months, review that again, because now you've just extended that 100. Because you can literally go on some of these training rides and get nothing out of it.
Sure.
I've seen people do it before. We were riding with freaking Graham Jarvis, and he was showing us like, hey, do this. And I watched a number of guys who had paid $800 just watch him do things.
That's how much it is? I've never
well,
done
we did it. We did it for 2 days. I mean, it was
Okay, 2 day
it might have been
class,
$700. The point is, it was we were paying like over $300 a day to ride with Graham, and I watched people not even do, and you were scared to do it, or you didn't want to look bad in front of other people. That's one of the cool things about Rich's deal, and we'll stop plugging it here in just a second, but it was just so important because when you're with Rich, it's probably just him and you, maybe another guy. If you've got a buddy that wants to come with you, if you want to bring a guy with you and then he's teaching you both. But the point is, it's these small groups, and it really, really works. And if you'll take the time to write down some things afterwards, you'll get a lot out of
Yeah,
it.
that's a smart move for sure. Is writing down some extra some notes, and I usually at the end too. I try to like kind of recap everything so it kind of stays in your mind, and that would be a smart idea to write it down. But yeah, anyway, hit me up, Rich Larsen 511. You can do Instagram, also my Gmail, richlarsen511@gmail.com. I'm down to do lessons anytime.
Yeah.
Selfless plug, right? Thanks.
So tell us about Red Bull Override in Texas. That was one of the last bigger races that you did, because it's kind of like a little bit of the off season here for hard enduro. So how did the Override go? And you were on. We'll talk about this in a minute, but you'd spent 5 days on the Sherco at that point.
Yeah.
How did that go?
So I got my Sherco got shipped to my house. I unboxed it, put it all together, put the stuff on that I needed, and basically tested it for, got it jetted in, made sure it was, kind of dialed, and rode it for 5 days. In those 5 days, so I set my suspension, to stock standard settings in your book. I set my sag, for my weight, went out and tested for maybe 2 days, and then I adjusted the clickers a little bit. I went a little bit softer on the clickers. I think I added a little bit of rebound, pretty simple stuff, not nothing that the average guy can't do. Changed the little things and drove to, 21 hours to Texas. And set up for Red Bull Override. So Red Bull Override was a 6-hour event.
Brutal.
Yeah, 6-hour hard enduro. It started at I think it started at 2:00 and went until 8:00 at night. So
you finished with lights.
Yeah, night racing. Yeah, lights on the front, and then I had lights on my helmet. Task Racing hooked me up with some lights, luckily. So I had a good light set up on my helmet, and so went. You go into that. I've never raced that long before. I've rode 6 hours for sure, go out and ride but that's riding with your buddies, you can take a break. Yeah. It's more relaxed. I've never been at a race pace for 6 hours. We line up and, head off. Cody Webb was there, and he waved the the green flag.
Because he's still recovering.
Yeah, was still recovering from his ACL. And dialed in the Sherco and raced for 6 hours. So during the race, I'll just give you a quick recap of it. Hammering down, I think I probably started in the top 15, and I worked my way up into the top 10. I felt like I was riding really well. That's usually where I land in these extreme enduros is I think in the United States I'm a top 10 rider, and that's where I've landed last year in the past, and I felt like that's where I was. Again, this is 5 days on the Sherco, so I'm like, okay, kind of getting the feel. What better way to get a feel for the bike than race it for 6 hours?
Oh my God.
So I'm hammering down. I felt like I was riding really good. I got a little bit lost. And
for like 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, there was a I think somebody broke a ribbon or something. I just went straight through it, and then when that happened, I went into just panic mode, where I'm just like, I don't know what I'm yelling and driving up and down the road, screaming like an idiot. And it's embarrassing. I'm sure if anybody who knew me saw me, they'd be, what's wrong with this guy? I'm just, what's going on? This is BS. I'm so mad, and finally kind of backtrack, figure out where I make the mistake. It was for sure 20 minutes of me driving around. I probably lost my voice driving around screaming. And finally I backtracked, figured out where I was going, hammering down. I knew I needed to make some passes, so I was pushing really hard, making a lot of passes, made a dumb little mistake, tipped over, and broke my master cylinder on my clutch.
Broke the master cylinder.
So
it wasn't just
the whole perch. The perch of the master cylinder. Sorry, I should have just said that.
Wow.
So broke the perch off. So it wasn't like I could just like tighten it down, or it broke right behind the master cylinder. So it was ruined.
They use Brembo.
Brembo, yeah.
It's okay. So it's a similar component to the Husky that you were on.
Exactly. So I get going, and I'm trying to figure. I kind of didn't even know where I was either, and I'm like,
Texas.
okay, I think,
You're in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, everything looks the same down there too. So I'm like, I don't know where I am. I kind of putt back to the pit. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess my 6-hour day's over in 2 hours, right? And I'm really, really angry, and my wife's there, and she's like, oh, that sucks. And she's, she doesn't really say much. And I'm like, she can tell I'm just super pissed. And I'm taking my gear off, before, let me go back. I walk over to Sherco and I'm like, hey, do you guys have an extra mouse or something? We don't have anything. I'm like, oh, shoot.
What?
Yeah. So I go back. Check this out. I go back. I sit down, taking my gear off, and Mark Ikeda, IRC Tire, right? So I work for IRC Tire. That's my main sponsor, right? IRC. We're going heavy on everything. And Mark Ikeda is there. He's the IRC USA general. He's the main guy of IRC in the United States here. And he comes over and is like, dude, I got one. I'm like, what? And he's like, Sherco, one of the guys ran off. He got you a mouse interested. Put your gear back on. My gear was off.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So now I'm putting my wet, sweaty / creek bed gear back on. I put my gear back on, and honestly, I wanted to quit. Like, I was tired. Like, one thing that happens...
And you're so far behind now.
Yeah, 100%.
So what's the point?
Exactly. When you're in an extreme enduro too, like, you're pushing your body to the absolute maximum. Most extreme enduros are about 2 hours long, and depending on kind of what it is, it may be like a 2 hour heat at the beginning of the day, 2 hour at the end. It's brutal. It's rough, and so you got demons in your head that want you to quit the whole entire time, for sure. For me personally, I don't know. Maybe Cody's just like out there having a good time. Maybe the top guys are just like, whatever, man, this is easy money. But for me, not. I'm in misery. I'm like, I hate this. I don't know why I'm doing this. Why am I putting myself through this? So I broke my bike and I was kind of stoked,
because it's an easy way out.
Yeah,
now.
but also
pressure's off.
Exactly, pressure is off.
You're pissed off, but you're relieved.
Yeah, exactly. I can say, well, I broke my thing. There's nothing I can do about it. It's mechanicals are the easy way out always. And I guess most guys, I don't know. Maybe most guys, I don't know. For me personally, I'm looking for the way out because it sucks, And
I love this candor. Like, this is you only get this with Rich. It's like, I was glad that it broke because now my day was over.
Right.
But at the same time, you're super frustrated.
I am super mad. I mean, the biggest thing is I drove 21 hours to Texas to go race this. My plan is to be in the top 10. I have this expectation in my head for sure, the way that I know I can perform. And, I know how good of a rider I am. I think I should land here. And that's what I want. And if I don't do it, then of course I'm going to be disappointed. But in that, you're in misery the entire extreme enduro, and in your head the whole time you're just like, I just want to let off for a minute. I just want to sit down. I just want to relax. And then you break something. It's like, oh, nothing I can do about that. It's the easy way out, right?
Yeah.
So Mark's like, I got you a new clutch perch, dude. We're good. Put your gear on. I'm like, oh. So I put my gear back on, and kind of reluctantly, but I put my gear back on, push my bike over, drain, you got to bleed it, to get all the fluid right and everything. So fire it back up and head back out. So I lost, let's say, 20 minutes, over an hour for sure. Well over an hour. Jump back in and start hammering down. And I'm like, well, I got 3 hours to go, so might as well just see what kind of finish I can get. I start pushing. I think I got 2 more laps on, and then I switched to my lighting helmet. And yeah, started riding in the night, and it starts getting cold, and I just kept hammering the whole time, pushing as hard as I could. Bike was feeling good. Felt like I was dialed. Felt like the last laps I really started getting into it, and I ended up finishing at 9:00 at night. So I came across the finish at like 7:50, and they were like, "You can do one more lap if you want." And I'm like, so basically it ends at 8:00, but if you get to the finish line before 8:00, you can go back out and get credited for another lap if you finish a lap.
Which would help you in the points or something?
Well, that's what I thought. I was like, well, if I can get an extra lap, maybe some of the guys quit that lap, or,
okay,
maybe some of the guys came in front of me at 7:50 and said, nah, I'm good. So I don't know where I am in
the standings.
In the standings, I mean, there was, I don't know, I think there was like 300, 400 people there. I don't know what place I'm in. I know I was in the top 10 when I crashed and broke my lever. So I got to be, and I lost an hour. So I got to be pretty far out of it, but let's see where I'm at. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to do everything I can. I'm here. Let's give it. So I went back out for another lap, took an hour, and got back in at 9 o'clock. They credited me for my lap, went into the results. I ended up getting 14th. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive after that adversity.
Yeah.
14th is awesome.
I was stoked, man.
Did you see how far, so were you able to go back and look at the standings and be like, look, if I shave an hour off, where does that put me?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I looked at was my lap times. And I
Okay.
know that my lap times, I was running the same pace as the guys in, right around from 6th to 10th.
Awesome.
Everybody in front of me, all the guys in the top 10, I for sure would have been able to put in another lap. And if I would have been able to put in another lap, I would have been right around that top 10 area where I wanted to land. So
cool.
I rode really well. I was stoked about the way I rode. I was stoked I didn't quit. I was able to get through everything. Luckily, my boy Mark was able to find a cylinder.
Mark
Sherco
saved the day.
found one, whatever. And so it was a good race. And to be able to lose an hour and 20 and still hit 14th, I'm stoked about it for sure.
I think that's phenomenal. That's an awesome story about just persevering, because there's so many. I might do my first desert race or so, or not. I might do one or two desert races this year.
Cool.
Just to kind of get the monkey off my back, because everyone has been begging me to do it.
Yeah, sure.
But I think there was I was talking to one of the race directors or some of the people that are in charge of things, and they're like, hey, look, one of the things you're going to have to do is force yourself to do that last lap. If you enter as a novice, then you're going to, a lot of times they don't do a second lap. And so it's like this relief, or they don't do the last lap or whatever. If you enter as an amateur or an expert, which I'm not going to enter as an expert, but I was trying to debate between novice and amateur. And one of the things that they were saying is like, look, if you enter as an amateur, you will get no points for the race if you don't complete like the whole thing.
Right.
Whereas the novices can, and they were saying sometimes it's really hard. I was talking to a buddy, and they're like, you might have just done this nasty, grueling lap on the desert race, which was like 40, 50 miles or 30, whatever. And your body is tired and you're back into the pits. And now you have to figure out how to talk yourself into doing that second loop, which is generally harder than the first loop. And you're already exhausted.
Absolutely.
And so you knew you had that happening to you, where like, look, I've got several hours more to go, and I want to quit now. And you had to talk yourself into not quitting.
Yeah, you know? That's the beauty of any competition. Truthfully, is there's always there's always an easy way out, always, and it's convincing yourself not to do that. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn who you are in those type of situations, man. I say this all the time to people, but it's something I truly believe. I think that self-awareness is the most important character trait a person can have. If you know who you are, you're able to relate to other people better, because you can look inside of yourself. You realize all the different things that it gives you perspective, learning who you are as a person. If you have your own perspective, then you realize other people, even somebody that you may not like, you can look at them and say, dang, that guy's had his own experiences throughout his whole life, and it's made him that way. So you can't really hate him, because a lot of those things, maybe he didn't have a choice in. I believe that competition, for me personally, has built this awareness around who I am and where I've come from. From the beginning of my life to now, it's a lot of it has evolved around riding dirt bikes, and the competition side of things has taught me who I am as a person. And it's that last lap. It's when you get there and you don't want to go out. If, they say you can go out, you got 2 minutes left. If you go back out, you'll get a whole nother hour at 9 o'clock at night. It's freezing cold. You don't know where you're at. Oh, my chain kept derailing on the last lap. I bent my chain guide in, and, my chain probably derailed 7 times on the last lap. Every time it's derailing, literally I want to cry. I'm laying my bike over going, Why is this out? I don't want to do this anymore.
And yet you still came in 14th.
But I still kept going. I finished it off. And when you get that, it's like, dang, I kind of learned something about myself. I got more in the tank. I can keep going, It's good to learn that. It's good to learn that about yourself.
You ever read the book? Shoot, I'm trying to think of it now. It's called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Oh man, David Goggins, dude, that guy is the best.
Have you so you know his story a little bit.
I love his story.
Yeah.
David Goggins is that's I get really nervous before racing. I hate racing. I've said this many times. Everybody comes up and they're like, dude, racing's life, man. I freaking moto life forever. And I'm like, dude, racing sucks. I hate it. I'm terrified.
I love this.
It's so scary to me. I don't like lining up. While it's going, I guess it's okay. I mean, when I get into the zone, I can actually start riding good. I like it, but for the most part, I don't. And I'll probably always do it. And, honestly, it sucks.
But it's the David Goggins mindset that keeps you going, right?
I listen to David Goggins stuff. Just him, being crazy.
And David Goggins, for the record, because a lot of guys won't know who he is. David Goggins is not a dirt bike rider.
No.
David Goggins is an extreme athlete. He's a Navy SEAL. Yep. He wasn't an orphan, but his dad beat the heck out of him as a kid. He's a black kid that grew up with a super hard life, and he was just tired of people telling him that he couldn't do things. And he went through Hell Week like 3 times in the Navy and just did all these crazy, crazy things that everyone said he couldn't do. He would run on broken legs.
Yeah.
He ended up being like an extreme, what do they call them? Extreme runner?
Ultra
runner, where they're running for like 100
miles,
hours and all these different things and just crazy, crazy stuff. And you read his book, first off, know that it's there's a lot of language.
Oh man,
he has a particular affinity to the F word. But if you can get beyond that, he gives some life lessons that are just like stunning.
Absolutely, man. He does, and like I said, I get really nervous before racing. I will listen to David Goggins stuff of him, screaming, yelling like a crazy person, and it makes me less nervous. It helps me get in the zone. When I'm hurting at the end of an extreme enduro, I remember Last Dog Standing last year, it was 120 degrees at Glen Helen Raceway. We went out for the second lap. Only 8 guys finished the full extreme enduro race. So on Sunday, there was 1,000 people that signed up for the sprint enduro, and it whittled down to 8 riders who finished the full extreme enduro race. And I was able to finish 6th. And that second lap, I had David Goggins in my head. I've seen him yell this thing where he's just yelling, "You don't know me, son," which really doesn't mean anything. But when I was in pain, I'm going, "You don't know me, son,"
Because he says when you think you're done, you've still got more than half in the tank.
100%.
He's like, you will be completely 100% spent, and it's just your brain tricking you.
Yeah, man. Your brain wants you to quit. It's crazy. It's just like I was saying, man. I was stoked when my bike broke. But
David Goggins would have beat the crap out of you if he was right there.
Exactly.
He would have just been like, son, boom.
Yeah. But I was glad that I got the part. I put it back on and hammered down.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
Yeah, that guy's an animal. But he definitely rattles around my mind in the points where I'm in the worst amount of pain.
I love it. David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. Go get it on Audible.
Check it out.
That's what I did. So tell me, Rich, and again, I guess this isn't a radio show. This is Rich Larsen. I don't maybe have to do that. If you've downloaded this thing, you should know, Rich. But switching, so you recently switched from Husqvarna to Sherco. Tell us a little bit. I want to dive into this on a bunch of different levels and talk about a number of the different aspects of Sherco and EFI versus carburetors and all of these different things. But just kind of generally give us the overview of what it's been like switching from Husqvarna to now Sherco.
Yeah, big time, man. So I've rode the Austrian brand for about 14 years. Started on KTM 300. I rode KTM all the way until 2014. I started riding KTMs in 2007, 2008, and rode KTM till 2014. And then Husqvarna, I started getting support from Husqvarna moved on to Husqvarna. I've rode the full model range, whether it is the XCW, XC, I've done the TC 250 models, and also, 4-strokes as well. When I was doing endurocross, I think, when I was the fastest when I was, training endurocross, and I felt like I was at the highest level that I've been at with endurocross, I was riding a 250F, 4-stroke. But so yeah, I've rode a whole model range, and now focusing on extreme enduro in the last few years, switching to the Husqvarna 250 TPI. So
TE 250i.
Yes, TE 250i. And when I got the bike, I was absolutely beyond impressed. And I still am.
The Sherco is what we're talking about.
So sorry. The TPI.
The Husky TPI. Okay,
yes.
got it.
So switching to the TPI bikes, the TPI is incredible. Super, super manageable power. Very, very smooth. When I first got it, it almost felt like the bike would almost keep running when I'd get into the technical stuff and almost kill the bike. It was almost like the TPI would almost help it keep chugging along.
Interesting.
So rode that for a long time in extreme enduro. Works really well. And just this last year, Sherco offered me a sweet deal where, I'm riding the 300 now. So switching from a 250 to a 300 and riding the SE Factory 300 from Sherco. So yeah, like I said, I put 5 days on, went and rode Red Bull Override. And yeah, ever since then, I've just been kind of dialing it in, doing a lot of testing on it, just trying to get it 100%. So I'm fully comfortable on it. But truthfully, it's crazy, starting with switching to a carburetor, right?
Yeah.
So for me, switching from a carb to a TPI machine is a lot easier than switching from a TPI back to a carb. A TPI, I kind of explained this on a video that I did for the IRC Moto YouTube channel, where I kind of compared and reviewed both bikes. But what I said was the TPI models almost feel artificial. The power is very consistent. It's like the computer is putting the exact same fuel ratio throughout the power line, the RPM line. It's like a consistent, very smooth, but almost artificial feel, where a carburetor feels very alive. If you're riding down just a flat road with a carburetor bike and your throttle at halfway through, it almost will accelerate and decelerate. It's even if you hold the throttle perfectly steady, the RPMs kind of fluctuate up and down. The bike's more alive on a carburetor. That's not saying one's better than the other, but they definitely feel different. So switching through a TPI, it was almost easier because it's an artificial feel, and it's kind of like you're just, you kind of adjust to it quickly. But switching back to a carburetor, so going from the Husky to the Sherco, for me, the carburetor was like, oh, this is a little bit different. I felt like I really had to adjust how much throttle to give it and how much snap I needed in certain technical situations. That kind of stuff was a lot different. So, that's a little bit on the weird side for me. It took me a little bit of time to get into it. One thing that I will say, though, with a carburetor, there's something about the way the bike lugs, where it pulls, where it tractors. The best way for me to explain the point that I think every extreme enduro rider is looking for is the point where the bike doesn't break traction but keeps pulling you forward. It's that tractor torque where you're lugging down at the bottom end of the power. Your gummy tire is hooking up as much as possible, and the bike is pulling you up a side hill or whatever. And there was a lot of points immediately on the Sherco where I got into technical situations where maybe I'd be side hilling on a trail I've done before, or climbing up something that's kind of a gnarly, rough thing that, maybe I've done it a few times before on the Husky. Switching to the Sherco, I did it 100% faster the first time I did it. And I was like, whoa, was that a fluke? I actually turned around and did the trail again. And it was one of those things where like, I think this is better. You know, it was surprising to me. I'm like, dang it. I think that this is just better for extreme enduro. A big thing about the Shercos they are a trials brand, right?
And that's probably part of what you're feeling too.
Exactly. I think that they have developed their trials bikes for a long time, and they've put a lot of that development into their enduro models. So when you get into those technical situations, a lot of times the bike feels like a trials bike. It has this ability to use your flywheel, right? So if you're an extreme enduro rider, you'll kind of understand what I'm saying. I'll try to explain it as best I can. In technical situations, you want to use your flywheel as much as possible. So what I will do before, say, going up a cliff, a big cliff or something, or getting momentum before a really technical uphill situation, I'll get my momentum with, before I'm in that technical situation, I will ramp up my RPMs to, very high, and then drop the clutch and almost use no throttle. So now what's happening through the technical situation is your bike is using the weight of the flywheel, the potential energy,
stored energy.
Yes, the stored energy of the clutch and your RPMs to now lug and hold traction through the technical situations. A lot of guys will get into technical situations and their tires will spin because they're trying to gain momentum in the technical situation. You want to gain momentum before the technical situation, and a great way to do that is load your flywheel, right? A lot of throttle up front, and then low throttle through the section.
Do you guys see what I'm saying? When it's so fun to watch Rich do these things and listen to him break it down. Graham Jarvis is doing what you just said, but he doesn't really seem like he has the ability to articulate that.
Right.
And that's one of the things I love about you. And so this is just super. I'm thinking about that and going, how can I apply this to my riding? I need to build up more power, more momentum in my clutch, or build up more of that potential energy.
Yes.
and maybe less throttle once I get into the thing. I'm going back and thinking about some of the situations I've been in recently, going, that probably would have helped me a lot.
Absolutely. So that's a huge thing that a lot of the extreme guys are doing. It's all about momentum before the section, not gaining momentum through. You want to have all your momentum before you get into that technical situation. So learning how to gain that quickly by pulling in the clutch, getting those RPMs up, slipping the clutch, and then your smooth throttle. You're almost giving it no throttle because you're using all that stored energy in your flywheel and your clutch to then explode and track you and pull you through the technical situation. That's where your tire is going to hold traction. If you're gassing it, your tire is just going to break traction. It don't matter if you have a gummy tire on or a moto tire on. Your tire is going to break. You can break traction on any tire. Spinning your tire is the number one thing that happens, right? That's the thing that stops you from moving forward.
And that's right before you flip down the hill and break something.
Exactly. So learning how to get that potential energy before, slip it, hold the traction, hold the throttle at a smooth level, a low RPM, and pull you through the technical situation is something that's going to help every rider. The best way for me to explain it is also have, be on the bike. If we go out riding and I can say, okay, check this section out, watch how I do this. Did you hear my RPMs? Did you hear where I was on the throttle and where I was off the throttle? All those little things kind of come into play, and seeing it's a lot easier than articulating it through podcasts. So I hope everybody could kind of understand that. But
I loved it. I've got to do some more noodling on that. And it's one of the other things that you had told me that I wrote down, which is carry a little bit more momentum than you think you need.
Absolutely.
And it's such a... people would be like, "Oh, that's a fun little thing to say," but it's so true. It's like, okay, you look at an obstacle, a scary thing. You might be looking at a 20-foot multi-step waterfall, which I looked at one point here recently, and I'm sitting there going in my head, I'm like, the last thing I want to do is get 3/4 of the way up that and then fall down.
Yeah.
So my natural inclination is going to be to give it X amount of energy or X amount of momentum, and is right before I hit it, I was literally thinking Rich Larsen and thinking, carry a little bit more momentum than you need. and you make it up, and these are the fun things. But it's interesting to hear you talk about the switching from the Husky to the Sherco, and how it's just got the more momentum, a little bit more luggable. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the fact that the carburetor is giving more fuel at those low RPMs than the TPI. The TPI is specifically designed to take fuel away from the low RPM ranges so it can meet emissions. TPI injection with Husky and KTM, it is not there to make the bike better. It is there to make the bike pass emissions.
Sure. Yeah. I think a big thing about the TPI models are there is a huge potential for this, I think if you had an app or something that you could go through and dial it in, I want to richen the bottom end and change certain fuel ratios, just like a tuner would do on somebody who's like a race car driver, right? They tune everything on the computer. The ability to do that personally, that would take that bike to the next level.
And you can do that with a Get ECU, like an aftermarket ECU.
Yeah, absolutely.
But KTM doesn't want to give you that because that's defeating the purpose of them. It's one thing to do it on the Yamaha motocross bikes, because that bike, the app that you get with the Yamaha bike it's basically a dumbed down version of the Athena Get technology. That's who made the technology.
Right.
The difference with the 4-stroke though is they're not adding so much oil into the fuel. They're not adding any oil into the fuel.
Right.
And so the 4-stroke just runs cleaner naturally. So it's easier for them to have a green sticker bike in 4-stroke and say, well, here, you can add a little more fuel and take a little more fuel away because the bike already runs cleaner from an exhaust standpoint. On the 2-stroke, it's a more complicated design to aspirate that bike through EFI, and then they don't want to give you stock the ability to make the bike not be green sticker compliant or whatever.
Sure.
So they're kind of in a tricky situation. And I love, there was something we were talking about right before we jumped on about the EFI and the carb. That's one thing I wanted to hear you articulate to the listeners here is obviously, so we know that the Sherco bike is awesome. We know that the motor is great, and it's been helping you in the tractor and luggability. You mentioned something though about how the TPI bike feels almost like it gets a little bit more. What was the word we were using? Efficient at the higher altitudes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
So
between the two.
A big way to tell with this is changing altitudes and jetting, right? So I will have a certain jetting for Utah. I just went down and did a little film shoot in California 2 weeks ago. So I changed my jetting and went and rode in California.
Had to add more fuel, richen it up.
Exactly.
For lower elevation.
Lower elevation, more air equals more fuel. So I richened it up, changed my jetting. I go down there and, the bike feels, when you're changing altitudes, when you're going to sea level from here in Salt Lake, which is 4,000 feet.
Well, we're at 45 here, and then all the riding you're doing is pushing
even
6
more so.
or 8.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big difference when you go down to California and you're in those sea level area. Now you really feel a difference in the bike's power, right? More air, more fuel. That's just more horsepower. The big thing that I noticed, especially on this carbureted bike, is when you change those altitudes, you really notice how much power you're gaining or losing depending on that. So coming back here to Utah, I was like, man, my bike really does feel a little bit underpowered compared to how it felt in California. Now, on the TPI bike, I think that it's more efficient at higher altitudes. I felt like that change from me going and riding in Utah, heading to California, from sea level, 5,000, 10,000 feet, all those have a lot. There's a big difference in the way the bike feels changing those altitudes. It's almost
on the carbureted bike, it's a more pronounced feeling.
Yeah,
right.
And on the TPI, it's like not there. It's like you can. There's definitely a difference. You can feel that it has less power, but it's a lot less noticeable. So I think that the TPI bikes are really efficient in that changing altitudes. I think that there's, again, both bikes are super rad. If there was two sitting in front of me, it would be very hard. If there was a TPI bike and a Sherco side by side, it's very hard for me to decide which one I like better. But I gotta say, something about the 36 millimeter Kian carb, it's tried and true, man. They've developed that thing for a lot of years. and man, it's pretty dialed.
That is real talk. You're not going to get that in very many other places, and I appreciate you just having the ability or the guts or the candor or the integrity to say, look, it isn't that one of these bikes blows the other away. They both have some advantages.
Sure.
And again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the carburetor. They're trying to mimic the carburetor with the TPI, and they're not quite there yet. They'll get better, but literally what they're trying to do is hit the standard that the carburetor can do.
Yeah.
And then make a couple of improvements here and there, but the carburetors are awesome. So thank you for that.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
So going just kind of another Sherco line of questioning here.
Sure.
So recently, I think was it before or after you and Cody probably just colluded and did this at the same time. But Cody Webb kind of shocks the world by switching to Sherco, freaks everyone out. I've listened to a podcast or two with him talking about it. I know there's like more to that story than meets the eye. I can just tell there's some undercurrent there.
Big time, yeah.
But because Cody isn't here, we won't speculate a ton. But it seems like Sherco is making a really large marketing push right now to break into the USA. I was wondering, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Is it just my perception that Sherco is making a big push intentionally, or are they just literally riding the wave of having Cody move over to them? What is your thoughts on this?
I mean, to say that they're not riding the wave would be dishonest. I mean, I think that it's a huge thing that Cody Webb switched to a Sherco. Going back a little bit, it's the Sherco's. I mean, just from me personally, it's an awesome bike, but it's been proven as well. The way that Mario Roman rides it. I mean, it's
finished Eresburg.
Absolutely. Well, he won. I think it was him or Wade Young. I know they were like on the podium together, but one of them won. I believe it was Extreme Lagares last year. One of the Extreme Enduro. I think it was in the West Series last year. But I mean, it's proven. It's an amazing machine. Now, Cody switching, was surprising. I learned about it quite a while before everybody did, and I was like, "Oh, what?" I mean, when I heard about it, I was like, "No, he's not." Nuh-uh.
You didn't leak that on your Instagram?
No. I was like, "No, I don't think he's gonna do it." I really didn't believe it because Sherco
fake
didn't
news.
really
Hashtag
exactly. Sherco really didn't have a presence here in the United States, right? I mean, there's not a big. Honestly, the first time that I heard about Sherco was a buddy of mine, Mason Ottersberg, as another endurocross rider, good rider. He rode Sherco for a little while back in 2016, 17, I think. So that was really the only thing I knew about it. Now, Cody switching, it was so surprising. I think that, obviously it's Cody Webb. I mean, arguably Cody's, the best extreme enduro rider to come out of the United States. As far as endurocross goes, I mean, him and Colton those guys go back and forth. They are both so fast, and they're a step above the Europeans in endurocross, 100%. Now, extreme enduro, Cody's quite a ways, I think, ahead of Colton, and Colton will admit that too. And Colton's working hard at I think competing with Cody this year. I think we're going to see some pretty sweet battles between those two, Colton Haker on the Husqvarna and Cody on the Sherco, in this United States extreme enduro stuff. Now, Cody's the real deal. I think Cody has the ability to win Eresburg for the United States. I think
that's a tall order.
Yeah, and I think that Cody has the ability to do it. And you know what? I've spoke to Colton Haker too. Colton and I are actually decent friends, and Colton wants to win Eresburg. And the fact is I'm like, whoa, that's crazy, man. But when you meet somebody who's as good as Colton, you kind of learn about how crazy that mentality that he has. He's kind of a crazy person, and there's an ability there that I think it's hard for me to even understand. He wants to push hard for that too. So here's my point with all of this. Extreme enduro is growing rapidly in the United States. It's huge in Europe, and I hope that it becomes that big over here. We're seeing a lot of guys going into these extreme events, whether they're, riders like me who are chasing, the series. They want to be in the top 10. They're pushing hard to be a very, one of the top riders, or guys who just want the challenge. See, this is this new thing. Whether they're some normal guy who just likes to go out and ride, some of these guys just want to go out and see if they can finish this race. It's a spectacle.
Yeah.
And that growth in the United States is something that I think Sherco sees. I think it's something that tire companies sees. So for me personally, I work for IRC. That's the direction that we're going with these extreme enduro tires. We're seeing all these companies come out with gummy tires. Gummy tires are for extreme enduro. That's what they're made for. So I think that there's all this development going to extreme enduro and the growth of it, this almost banking on the growth of extreme enduro in the United States. What better way for a company to bank on the growth of extreme enduro than sign the best extreme enduro rider in the United States, Cody Webb? Sherco jumped on board as quick as they could, and they got him. And I think we're going to see some really, really neat stuff in the coming years.
No, I totally agree. It's super fun, and it's good for the industry. No matter if you're I laugh at people who are brand loyal. There's a lot of people out there that think I'm just a KTM fanboy. I just like to ride nice motorcycles. And,
me too.
And there's there are reasons for each one of these bikes. For me, the best bike for me that I have been able to find so far tend to be the orange bikes, but that doesn't mean that these other bikes aren't good.
Sure.
And the more that there is competition, the more that Sherco pushes things, the more that Beta pushes things, and gas. We'll see how all that kind of shakes out. That is all good for us as consumers in the industry. I wish that Yamaha, Honda, and Kawasaki and Suzuki would enter into that. It doesn't appear that they're going to, but it would be nice if they did, because it's just the more competition we have, the more it pushes things forward, and it's good for us as consumers.
Absolutely, that's the big thing that people need to understand is whether you're brand loyal or not, it's one of those things that the more brands there are, the more development is, the more rad stuff that you get.
Yeah,
personally.
absolutely.
You get to buy an awesome bike.
Absolutely.
And that's why I mean, with this SE Factory Sherco, I mean, I've been super, super impressed with it. And they've just developed, they've developed an extreme enduro bike. And for me, I want to ride extreme enduro. So I'm beyond impressed with the bike.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's switch gears over to IRC.
Yeah.
The tire that I think you compete with is the IRC IX09W. Did I say that right?
Yes, sir.
So tell us a little bit about that tire. Why is this your tire of choice? And what are the other tires that you kind of use and gravitate towards in that IRC lineup?
So real quick, the IX09W Gakota is the tire that I use. The Gakota means, lizard, sticks to walls, right?
So they have that. The Gakota is another. So that's it's not. There's an IX09W and then the Gakota?
No, there is an IX09W, which is just the motocross version.
Okay.
Same tread pattern as the IX09W Gakota. Two of the same. I mean, they look identical.
It's just one's the gummy compound.
One's got a gummy trials compound.
The Gakota is the trials part of it.
Yes.
Okay.
If it says Gakota, that means soft. And then we also make a VE33S Gakota, which is a hybrid tire, right? Soft. So we also make a VE33, which is a regular compound, same tread pattern as the VE33S Gakota, but the VE33 just a moto tire basically.
Love it.
I personally, for extreme enduro, I use the IX09W Gakota. That's the tire that I put a lot of hours on, man. I probably put more hours on the IX09W Gakota than just about anybody. I was kind of one of the first guys to ride for IRC. I started riding for IRC when I was racing endurocross. In 2016, I was doing top 15 in the endurocross points and hammering down, and IRC started supporting me. So since then, I've been riding the IX09W Gakota. The reason why I like that tire, especially for extreme enduro, is the super soft ability of the tire. Now, a lot of guys don't like it because it's too soft. especially if you're not only riding extreme enduro. And that's always the thing I want to say. There's kind of a caveat to explaining, everybody's like, what tire do you use? I'm like, well, I use the IX09W Gakota, but are you going to want to use that? It's so soft. It's so flexible.
You've got to have a moose to run that.
Oh
right?
yeah, 100%. So it is. You can run a tube, a heavy duty tube would be all right. I've never popped a heavy duty tube with one. I used to run tubes early in endurocross, but if you're competing, it's one of those things where even no matter what tire I'm running, I would run a moose bib just because I can't afford to get a flat tire in DNF because of a flat. Right?
Do you run 2 rim locks when you're doing that?
Oh yeah,
two rim locks. You always run 2 rim locks.
Yeah, on the rear, always.
Because we're starting to. We've seen a couple of cases here recently where people have had 1 rim lock and then all of a sudden their tire's spinning on the moose.
So I was racing. I think it was San Francisco or Ontario endurocross back in the day, and I was 100% sure that my clutch was slipping. I was going, dude, my clutch is slipping. This is crazy. I went out for the LCQ and I was hit. There was these 2 double jumps in a row, and it was so sketchy because I felt like I wasn't getting the pull off the face of the jump that I needed. And I'm like, what is going on? My clutch is slipping. Dang it. It sucks. Went out and I actually, finished the race, whatever, drove home, changed the clutch. It kept doing it. And
not the clutch.
Yeah. Rode around, finally made a mark in the tire and realized that thing was just spinning on the rim. 1 rim lock, with a moose bib. It was just spinning on the rim. So
it's so funny because I've heard of other guys, and they're obviously not Rich Larsen level, but I know people that have run mooses with no rim lock.
Oh wow!
You know what I mean? And they haven't had much of an issue. And then
I think with a very stiff. So it's all about carcass, right? So a lot of tires have a 3-ply carcass. Some tires have a 4-ply carcass. There's all, every brand has a different setup for how they build tires. So for me personally, again, IX09W Gakota, that's only a 2-ply carcass. That's a very thin carcass tire. I mean, if you put your hands in between one side of the inside of the tire and the outside of the tire, you can feel how thin this tire is. Now, changing over to maybe a motocross tire that we make, even the same tire, the IX09W regular in motocross, that would be more of a 2-ply carcass and it has a breaker ply in it. All these tires have a different internal setup. So if you were running a moose bib with, say, maybe an M5B Evo, which is another popular tire that we make, you might be able to run it without a rim lock. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but just because the carcass is so hard, it's going to be a lot less likely to spin just because of how hard it's pushing out. Also, it depends on how big your moose bib is, right? So if you're running a really soft moose bib, I mean, there's so many different variables that go into all this stuff. It's all trial and error. And I mean, again, I was racing pro at the time and I wasn't running 2 rim locks and, I paid for it, but it's one of those things where you kind of have to learn and just, adapt and adjust and make changes as you see fit. But personally, I run 2 rim locks all the time. And yeah, IX09W Gakota, I'm looking for the softest possible tire there is. So for me, I need all the flex. I'm, a lot of times I'm just riding up riverbeds here in the summer. So it's, the stuff that I do is tailored to extreme enduro, and I need the softest possible tire I can get. Yeah,
no, I love that. It's hard to navigate the IRC website. I can't find even on here. You can't find Gakota here.
Go to IRC Moto.
Oh, IRC Moto.
That's our that's the international site there.
Okay, so that's what I'm doing. So ircmoto.com.
There you go.
Okay, cool. Okay, now we've got extreme. So yeah, I just did a Google search for IRC tire and I hit the international
we need
website.
to get rid of that international website.
Yeah, well, no, this is much better because this actually shows the Gakota stuff.
Yeah, so
and it gives you off-road and extreme. So guys, if you're going to learn some more about IRC, you got to go to ircmoto.com. Don't make the mistake I just did and go to the international site. And this is much, much better.
Good.
I love this. And something else I wanted to transition into. I just finally was able to grab myself and buy 4 of the IRC VE33S Gakota tires.
Beautiful.
I like that tire because it's this hybrid gummy that still has a stiffer carcass, so I can run tubeless with it, but it's still got a softer compound than a general like traditional knobby, and I love that tire.
Yeah.
The only problem that I have with it is availability. There's almost like this. There's almost like this underground undercurrent people on Instagram that wait for the tire to come on with some of these, vendors, maybe like a Rocky Mountain ATV or something, and the tire's out of stock. And then suddenly it'll come in stock, and somebody will post a picture and be like, "Hey, go grab one of these before such and such person buys them all."
Right.
And it's like this little inside joke thing, and that's been my.
And then guys post like a picture of a stack
of them,
like 15 they all bought from Rocky Mountain or whatever. Like I got them all. Oh, no wonder they're all out of stock.
Sorry, dude, I bought them all. And so and it's a good tire. I haven't found a better all-around tire for what you're doing and the training that you're doing and things. Obviously, you're going to use that extreme enduro tire, but that tire, if somebody goes and they buy it, they're like, wait, how come this is worn out after 15 hours or whatever? They're gonna
right, yeah.
And so you have to know what you're buying. But with going away from that, though, what is IRC doing to improve availability of some of these tires that are really now super hot?
Yeah, so couple things. First off, the VE33S, it's so rad to see all you guys running it. I'm glad you guys like it. It's cool to see that this is kind of that same thing that I'm saying about this growing of this extreme enduro.
Yeah.
Now, I know for you, Kyle, I mean, I've seen some of the videos that you guys do. You guys get into it. It's rad to see you guys getting into extreme situations. I mean, I saw that snowy hill that you slid down. I mean, that was man.
That wasn't IRC. That was a Dunlop that let me down there.
Dunlop
there you go.
There's a problem.
Dunlop tire wasn't hooking up good.
So
it had nothing to do with the tire.
But
It's just
getting into those extreme enduro situations, those like a lot of guys are doing that style of riding nowadays. It's growing, and that's like just a hair off of going and competing in an extreme enduro. So maybe I have to convince you to get out here and do one with me, but. I'll give you a bunch of free training before, and then we'll go out and dial it in, man.
I'll up my life insurance.
Yeah, there you go. So, okay, availability. Now, we're seeing this growth in the sport. A lot of guys are buying these tires. It's awesome for the sport. It's awesome for us at IRC, right? But it is frustrating for a lot of guys because they're like, I want this tire. I've been waiting, and it's out of stock every time. So you will see it way more available in the coming months because we have met with Western Power Sports specifically. We actually just got done with the national sales meeting a week ago. I was in Boise presenting the IRC stuff to all the national reps for Western Power Sports. Now you're going to see, hopefully we see a lot more guys pushing these VE33Ss, the M5Bs, and the IX09Ws. Those are our main sellers, right?
Yeah.
With that VE33S, that's the one that everybody wants. We have I know that right now Western Power Sports is fully stocked with them. So you're going to see them much more available now. And they have been making huge orders. So we've got shipments of them coming in. They're going to basically what happened, there was a sudden demand for this VE33S.
Probably unseen.
Yeah, we didn't think that this was going to happen. Obviously, I kind of started really pushing with all of the IRC stuff. We've started to push on our media. We've started to do everything that we can to get the IRC name out there. In doing that, it's kind of like, whoa, it suddenly started blowing up. And specifically with this VE33S, because a lot of guys think this is the best tire we make because it's very well-rounded.
Versatile.
It's so versatile, right? You can get into the extreme stuff. You can shred the single-track trail, whatever it is. Say you're setting a single-track trail.
You can even do a moto on that.
Absolutely.
Like
I've done it 100%. I've tested it, and it's like, oh, this is actually pretty solid, You're riding something single track and then you get into a technical situation, you have the gummy compound on reserve for when you need it. And that's why these guys like it. It lasts a long time. It lasts longer than most gummy compounds because it's a little bit harder. Yeah. It's way harder than the IX09W Dakota, right? It's right in that middle ground. So it has that kind of all-around style for the guy who rides everything. And that's why it's so popular. So it will be much more readily available in the coming months. It was such a sudden thing where so many guys were buying. We're going, holy cap! What do we need to do here? We need to up our, So
production.
Exactly, we're upping our production, and also the biggest thing is the distributors need to understand how much they need. They don't want to overbuy on any product, right? So basically we make the tire, and then the distributors buy the tires from us, and those products go to, whether it's Rocky Mountain or specific shops. They're the ones who are distributing the tires out through the United States. Well, the distributors don't want to overbuy on one product, so they
especially not a new product.
Exactly.
Like
so they always play on the safe side. So now that we've kind of got over the initial hump of it being sold out all the time, you will see it much more available.
Oh, that's good. So with the M5B, I have a suggestion. That tire ought to have like some sort of warning label that says, "Do not ride within 15 feet behind someone who is running this tire, because it might be hazardous to your health."
Dude, I might steal that from you, because that's a super good marketing campaign.
Because I was riding behind one of my buddies, Shane Johnson. Shane, you're probably listening to this. One day over in, I can't remember where we were, Wellington or something. And that was hazardous to my life. Like, because he was running a brand new M5B. And to be honest, I didn't even know what it was. He's like, I'm like, is that the Gecko? He's like, no, this is the M5B. And the lugs are like 6 inches tall. Dude, I swear to you.
They're gnarly.
They're not 6 inches, but the point is that tire digs.
Yeah.
And it's got lugs that look like it came out of a horror magazine.
Yeah.
Or a horror movie. And it's dangerous. Don't get too close behind it.
I mean, a 450 or a 500, two-stroke 450 cc, in front of you with an M5B, it's like you better have a chest protector on.
Oh yeah, and like double goggles.
Yeah, yeah. That's a gnarly tire. That tire is actually won more hill climbs than any tire, for obvious reasons.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a gnarly one. But a lot of guys really like that for all around riding too. It actually just won the 2019 Sprint Enduro Championship with Evan Smith in Georgia, the East Coast. He races GNCC and Sprint Enduro, and he won the Sprint Enduro Championship running the M5B Evo.
That's cool.
It works really well in that sandy, soft stuff.
I'm gonna have to ride it. I've only followed it, and I was like, no freaking way.
Yeah.
It isn't supposed to be this painful.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's another tire too. You can use a tubeless system, thicker carcass, as well as the VE33S. A lot of guys are getting, I think Tyler's getting like 35 hours on his VE35S.
Yeah. I don't push them that long because I'm not as good as a lot of the riders that I ride with, and so I need some extra advantages.
Yeah,
and so one of the advantages that I use is I'm like, I'll run a tire to about 20 hours. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going with these guys over here. I need every advantage I can get.
That's smart thinking.
I'll throw on new rubber, because it's something that I've learned more than maybe anything else in my riding is that the tires you put on your bike are more important than anything else you do.
I'm so glad you're saying
all of
that.
these people that are like putting, I'm not saying don't spend money on your suspension, blah, 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 but I'm right in the weight range for these bikes. And so I feel like a lot of times spending money on my suspension isn't the best way I can go.
Yeah.
I can promise you this. Spending money, just having fresh rubber on your bike is going to do more than anything else you could possibly do.
Dude, I mean, that is, I like to think that I'm pushing myself to be at the highest level. I'm doing everything I can to compete in the top of the extreme enduro guys. And there's a lot of guys that are better than me, but I'm pushing as hard as I can. I train a lot. I'm riding 6 days a week. The first thing that I change on my bike is the tires. That's the contact point of the ground. And it's not just because I work for IRC. I mean, I know, all right, I work for IRC, but truthfully, that is the only contact your bike has with the ground. It's your tires. That's where your bike is. It's going to hook up or it's going to not hook up, right? And those are the things that you're going to notice the most. For me personally, I run stock stuff. I haven't changed my suspension on my Sherco, just clickers. That's the only thing I've done, clickers.
And it was the same on your Huskies.
100%. I don't make a lot of adjustments. I make sure I keep my oil clean in my suspension. I make sure that I'm, servicing my stuff so it's always tight.
And you're putting protective parts on them.
Protective parts, 100%. You got to make sure you got your skid plates and your rotor guards and all that stuff. Super important. But to me, the number one, and I mean, this is for my riding specifically, extreme enduro, that style of riding. If you're a trail rider, extreme enduro rider, somebody who gets out into the mountains, I think tires are number one. definitely when you get into the higher speed stuff, when you're riding motocross, when you're, doing supercross, if you're a, GNCC racer, those guys, absolutely, suspension is very important. But for me, I'm not going to buy, what's the cone valve? I'm not going to buy $6,000 cone valve forks. I just don't think it's necessary. I mean, I've rode them. I've tested them. They're definitely better. That's a great example is, on my previous bike, I was running WP. Now I switched to KYB on the Sherco. Honestly, I like the KYB better. I really like the KYB components. I think they're great. I think they're better. Now, would I then get a KTM and switch my WP stuff to KYB? No, I'm not going to do that. It's not worth it to me. The price point is way too high for me to think it's worth it to spend $4,000 on KYB suspension for my Husky, cone valves for my Husky or whatever. The things that matter are making sure your suspension's set up correctly for your weight, dialing in the clickers, feeling out what direction you need to go with those for your style of riding. And I truly believe that tires are number one.
I'm not surprised about that at all. If we walked out into my shop out here, you would see a stack of Dunlop AT81s up in my loft.
Yeah.
Because I pull them off the bike and because especially if I'm doing a review now of these bikes, like I've reviewed, several betas in a row, they've got a tire on there, which I'm not going to drag through the mud here on this, but I don't want to run it.
Sure.
And I want to put a tire on there. I'm like, you know what? This review is about the bike, and I am no longer willing to hamstring my impression of the bike based off of a subpar piece of rubber.
Dude, that is such a good point too. Like for you, you're testing. You go from bike to bike to bike. You ride everything. For you need something that you're 100% used to. So for me, when I switch from Husky to Sherco, it's like one component that I know is the IX09W Dakota because I put thousands of hours on that tire. So I get the bike. I immediately put those tires on because that's what I've ran for so long. That helps you with your understanding
to know what the baselines are for everything.
Exactly. You have to, and I don't care if it's an IRC or a Dunlop or whatever tire the listener right now is comfortable with, whatever they prefer, that's the tire that you've got to put on your new bike before you go switching suspension and switching, all of your settings. The tire that that you are comfortable with, that you've tested and understand where it performs and where it doesn't perform, how it performs in specific situations, the tire that you 100% understand is the first thing that you should be changing, because then that helps you change and make the correct decisions when you're testing your new machine.
That's gold. That's radio/podcast gold right there. I hope you guys listen to that, because that is something that both Rich and I are passionate about right now. You go out there and you get your new bike. Don't leave that tire on there that you know nothing about. Put a tire on there or tires, front and rear, that you know a lot about, and see that. And that way you can start to make some adjustments from that point. So any new tires on the horizon that IRC is working on for like this hard enduro segment, or what can you tell us about that?
So, I can't completely go into it, but I will say that I am testing some tires right now. That we are in the development process right now. We're trying to get something new dialed in. Here's the thing. IRC is pushing super hard. We want to be back on the map. IRC used to be really big in the 80s and 90s. In fact, I think Ricky Johnson actually rode for IRC at one point. We were big in the moto scene, and it was a very known thing, and it kind of fell off, and there was a lot of different reasons for that. So now we are pushing hard. It's kind of a resurgence, and the direction that we're going is in the off-road market. We're focused on extreme enduro. We're focused on off-road. We're focused on these guys because I think a lot of these off-road guys feel like they're underappreciated, and the fact is I think there's more off-road guys than motocross guys. I mean, there's a huge pyramid, right? There's the top 1%, the guys that can be in the top 10 of the sport, or in the top, whatever you want to talk about, whether it's motocross, endurocross, extreme enduro, whatever. There's there's a very small portion of guys that can run at that highest level.
Eli Tomac, Ken Roxon,
Right,
Cianciarillo,
absolutely.
Brett,
There's
Justin
a
Brayton.
very small number. And then there's a huge pyramid down below. There's a huge market for the guys that are just the average dude. And I think that's a big thing that, going to what you're doing, Kyle, I mean, you're an average dude. You love dirt bikes. You
Right.
love riding dirt bikes. You go out, you ride, you enjoy it as much as possible, and you've formed that into something that is much bigger than that. You've taken this podcast, your social media, everything, you're taking it and you're putting content out there for the average rider. And with IRC, we want to hear what you guys want to say. Just like the same thing that you're doing, Kyle, looking at the average guy saying, hey, I'm an average guy. This is how it feels. This is the direction that I went with this and this and this. This is for the average rider. That's the direction that we want to go, because that's the big pyramid. Those are the guys who feel like they're neglected, and those are the guys that are spending the money in the sport, right? So we're developing. We want to hear what you guys want, what kind of tires you guys want. That's a big thing. We're listening to what everybody's saying. We are developing some new stuff. The plan for the next 2 to 3 years is putting out 2 to 3 tires every single year.
That's so awesome, because you talk about that triangle, and if you guys just think about that, for so often, tires specifically have been designed for the top people in that pyramid.
Yes.
And that market is narrow up there at the top by design. And if we can start marketing now down to the fatter part of the triangle, and obviously you're going to have to give up certain things that the pro wants, but there's only so many pros out there, and let's be honest, most of the time you're going to give that stuff to the pros.
Exactly.
So if we're going to sell this, we need to market it to the wider, broader demographic.
100%.
Which is cool.
I think that's kind of the direction with the VE33S. I mean, I could use that tire in a very dry extreme enduro, somewhere where, it's not super slick. I could use it there. It works great in those situations. And if I'm just going out riding, like, doing some trail riding or anything higher speed, like, I'd 100% put one of those on. But for me personally, I'm running the IX09W Dakota because it's made for what I do, but that's a very small portion.
Right.
That's why that tire is always in stock.
Traction is king.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're pushing in that direction. We want to market to the average guy, and we want to hear what you guys want. But yeah, like I said, 2 to 3 tires for the next 2 to 3 years. So we're going to be dialed in here soon.
Love it. I'm excited to see that. Let's talk about moving from 250 to 300cc two-stroke. So you've ridden all of these different bikes over the years.
100%.
But in recent memory, the last time I had you on, you were riding a Husky TE 250i.
Yes.
And excuse me, I specifically asked you at the time, like, why the 250 over the 300? Because it seems like more of the 300 or more of the hard enduro guys gravitate more towards the 300 because of the extra torque. And one of the things that you said was, hey, look, I'm more comfortable with the 250. I've ridden a lot of motocross bikes. I like the way the power comes on. And I also just want to show people that, the 250 is just as capable as the 300. So now with Sherco, you're now riding the 300 two-stroke. Yep. Did they give you a choice? And let's talk about like how you adjust from going from the 250 to the 300 now.
Yeah, I guess they kind of did give me the choice. It was all my decision to go to the 300 because I wasn't sure what the bike was, right? I haven't put...
You hadn't ridden one, had you?
No, this is my...
So you signed before, I went in blind. Sight unseen.
Yeah, sight unseen. I went in blind. So for me, that's like, I was like, I don't know. I need every advantage.
You went the safe way. You're almost like, look, this is the safer bet.
100%. Now, that being said, I've tested... so for me riding the Husky 250, before that I rode the TC 250 a lot. I did a lot of enduro cross on the TC 250. That bike is super snappy. I like the way the 250's power is. It's a moto type bike. Switching to the 250, it kind of had a similar. It was kind of similar. It had. Obviously, it wasn't as snappy as the 250 motocross version, but the 250 Enduro, the TE 250i, had a little bit more snap to it. I felt like it was
as opposed to a 300.
Yeah, as opposed to a 300. The power delivery was more what I was used to. Now with a 300 on this new Sherco, it's hard for me to compare. I guess it's hard for me to compare brand to brand for sure, because they are so different, right? One has their advantage, one doesn't. Some things work a little bit better in a certain situation, and now it's even harder because one was a 250 and one was a 300. That makes a big difference. Now, that being said, the 300's power is very, very smooth. It's on the bottom end. It's got that tractability. Okay. Now my 250 definitely had a tractable power, but for me personally, I would say that the carburation is where the biggest difference is. Now, I think this is going out on a limb, and I would love to do this test, but I think that my 250, my TE 250i from Husky is faster than the 300 from Sherco.
Just in a little drag race.
I would say if we did a drag race, I think I could win on the 250 TPI.
Yeah, but I think that was just more of the fact that it's a 250 versus 300. 300s are not drag race bikes.
Right. And I think that the way that the power delivery is on the 250 for what the riding that I did and switching from a motocross 250, I liked that snap. I liked the way that bike felt. Now that I've kind of developed as an extreme enduro rider, I think the 300 definitely has its advantages. There is a more of a torquey bottom end. You have that little bit of extra power. There's
and maybe carrying a little more energy in the flywheel, like you were talking about.
100%. It's one of those things where you're carrying that little extra 50 cc's almost gives you that little bit of extra momentum that you need in those technical situations. It just kind of pulls you along a little bit better.
Yeah. They feel slightly heavier when you're riding them. I feel like the 300 feels slightly heavier than the 250, and I think it's just because of the more rotating mass.
It's just more mass.
A little bit more rotating mass, because the engine cases are the same. Everything is the same. It's just a different piston with a different stroke and a different cylinder size.
Imagine with that more rotating mass in those technical situations, if you were riding it the way that I do, right, where we're loading the engine at the bottom to gain momentum, and then we're holding that momentum through the technical situation, right? So you're kind of doing a right, lug. That sound, you're moving a lot more mass with the 300. That rotating mass then is able to pull you a little bit better in those technical situations because it's more. It's just, more what's the object in motion stays in motion, right? Einstein dialed it in for us.
Inertia. But I also feel like the 250 can make you a better rider because we can get so lazy on the 300s.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that you're getting lazy on it. You're probably the antithesis of that, but I think the general rider, I know that I can become more lazy. I'll catch myself hanging on to a gear too long on both, slowing down. Well, it's when I slow down, I'll hang on to a gear and I won't shift down.
Yeah, that's
on the
a great
300,
point.
I'll get lazy.
For sure.
On the 250s, I'll click up faster through the gears because I won't. I'll hold the gear longer on the 250 when I'm shifting up.
Yeah.
Because they rev out a little better. But I get lazy on my downshifts on the 300. And sometimes that bothers me. Like there are definitely days where if I know I'm going in a certain situation, I'd want the 300. And other times, if I'm going ripping out in the desert, I'll take the 250 every day of the week.
Yeah, a lot of times the 250, you ride it harder. You have to. It's almost like it puts you in the zone a little bit more. You're revving it out more. It definitely revs out more than the 300. It's one of those bikes that really that snap. I keep saying that, but it's that snap that and the pull to the top is just different on the 250 compared to the 300. And yeah, I think a lot of times it can make you a better rider. It can make you a more aggressive rider. So I would love to test one of those the Sherco 250s to kind of compare. Maybe one day I can set something up, but yeah, anyway, it's pretty radical.
No, that'd be cool. So we were talking about this before we jumped on the recording. We were just talking about, so Sherco, the one cool thing about it is they really have a bunch of different models of bikes. They've got their enduro segment, their trials segment, their cross country, their leisure segment. The two that I'm most interested right now is the enduro segment and the cross country segment. It's really difficult for us to identify the differences between the enduro segment and the cross country segment. I know that the enduro segment comes with a headlight and a tail light, whereas the cross country segment doesn't. If you go to the factory level, because they have kind of a factory level, which if you're familiar with KTM or Husky, that's like your 6 days version,
right?
Or your
Somewhat,
or your Rockstar version, a little bit, But in the enduro line of bikes, they have their standard levels, like you'd have a 300 SER. The S stands for, or the E stands for the enduro, and the R is just, that's the bike, so it's the SE-R. Then they have an SE factory in the enduro line. Down in the cross-country line, which is more probably what like a KTM XC would be, they only do factory bikes. It looks like all of the factory bikes come with the KYB suspension, whereas the standard bikes come with a WP fork.
Yep.
You said that you've loved your KYB.
Yeah,
so
I'm really impressed with the KYB.
It'd be interesting to see what type of valving they have in here. The one of the things that people forget is just because it's KYB, there's a multiple different cartridges that you can stick in those things.
Oh yeah.
So not every KYB is valved the same.
100%.
So keep that in mind, guys. Just because it says KYB doesn't mean it's going to be the best thing. It's the valving, and then it's for you, the type of riding that you're doing. But I'm really encouraged to hear you say that you love it. You love the suspension that you've got on the bike. That's super fantastic.
Yeah, a big thing about the suspension is I feel like it's almost a very progressive feel, which I really like. I like the feeling of a bike that can sit in the stroke. So in a technical situation, if I'm riding through a rock section, I want the bike to be in the stroke. I want it deep, riding right in the middle of the stroke. But I like a bike that doesn't bottom on hard hits. So I like a more progressive suspension, soft at the top, really hard at the bottom. The KYB feels very, very progressive. It gets harder as you go down. I've actually kept softening mine because I feel like I can keep going softer, and I'm trying to get to that point where, okay, now I'm bottoming, I need to go a little bit harder, right? So it's one of those things. I like the bike to be able to ride deep in the stroke. You want a bike to ride, nice and plush in technical situations, but you also don't want it bottoming when you have a really hard hit, like say you're hitting a rock or a log at speed. You don't want that bike bottoming. So there's a fine line. I feel like the KYB has done a very good job on being able to ride in the stroke when I need it and not bottom in the hard hit situations.
Yeah, and on the beta that I'm riding right now, it's got a KYB fork, but the valving, we don't know. I don't know exactly what valving it has in it. It's very harsh. It's very harsh compared to the other 4 or 5 bikes that we've put it next to. It's the harshest of all of them, and I've taken all the compression clicks I can out of it, and it's still too harsh. It is valved right now for someone who's doing GNCC, like 3rd, 4th, 5th gear type stuff. It is not valved to where you can go do the hard enduro stuff. But I'm pleased to hear, because even probably in a week or two, I've got to go pick up a Yamaha YZ250 FX, which will also have the KYB fork, and I've had it on 6 or 7 bikes.
Sure.
But it's just amazing to me how differently they are valved.
Yeah.
Like the last time I had a KYB fork that I really liked was on a YZ250X back in 2017. I loved it. I gelled with that one. I had just come off of the YZ250FX, and it was just like, it was just okay. It had different components inside of it. Just because it says KYB on the side doesn't mean that they're all not all
yeah, absolutely. I think especially with the off-road, off-road style riding, I mean, every brand who makes an off-road bike has a different assumption of what off-road is, right? Yeah. So for each thing, maybe one's developed for GNCC and one's developed for hard enduro. I mean, those are 2 completely different styles of racing. I think with a motocross style, all the moto bikes are made for moto tracks, right? If you're buying one of the Japanese brands, or even the KTM and Huskies, the motocross bikes are made for moto tracks.
Yeah.
So I think, with the off-road, it makes it a little bit it's a lot more about preference, and that's a big thing. Is get your bike dialed in, put the right tires on, so you know how it performs, and then start messing with your suspension.
No, that's cool. So as we kind of wind down here, I've got a trials bike. I've got a gas trials bike. I don't ride it hardly at all. That's actually where I tore my ACL. And ruined my whole life that one year.
Gosh, it's amazing that, yeah,
But it sounds like with Sherco now, you might have some opportunity to. We touched on it. Sherco is a trials company.
Yes,
and so now you have the opportunity maybe to get some support and maybe get a bike get a trials bike. Are you interested in doing some competing in that?
So yeah, I'm kind of actually planning on that. I'm thinking maybe I'll get one of the a new model Sherco and start doing some of these trials competitions. A big thing about extreme enduro, and I tell this to all the guys I teach too, is your balance is a huge part of your riding, especially when we get into technical stuff. It's all about being able to keep your feet on the pegs, because if you can keep your feet on the pegs, you're keeping weight on the rear tire, and weight on the rear tire equals traction. So with trials, obviously, the best riders all come from a trials background. I mean, there's a reason why Colton Hager, Cody Webb, Graham Jarvis, Manuel Lettenbichler. I mean, all these guys, Taddy Blazuziak, all these guys were former trials champions. All of them are great trials riders. They've focused heavily on their technical ability, not just with balance, but with your throttle and clutch control. It's so huge. So cross training like that for me is very important. I do have a trials bike right now, but I'd love to get a real modern one and I'm thinking starting competing this year. So just an extra step, an extra thing that you can do. And the beauty of a trials bike is, I don't really have to, I have a decent sized backyard too. So I can ride every day. And that's kind of when I'm in the focus, when I'm training for extreme enduro, when I'm focused 100%, okay, this is my next race. I've got 2 months to prepare. This is how I'm going to do it. My focus is be on 2 wheels every day. So no matter what, I'm probably out in the mountains riding 4 or 5 times a week. And then on those days I'm not riding, I'm at least putting an hour or 2 in on the trials bike, sometimes doing 2 a day. So it's 7 days a week, trying to ride as much as possible. And it's good to cross train and develop all, it's all about being a good all around rider. Even riding moto is important, everything, getting that aggression on the moto side of things, having, riding moto, riding trials, riding extreme enduro, all of it is very important to be at the highest level. And that's what I'm trying to do.
That's so cool. Do you think you'll do, it looks like the Sherco trials bikes are all 2-stroke, which is totally cool.
Yep.
Do you think you'll do 250, 300? There's even a 125 version here.
I would probably do, 250 or 300. Either way. With the 125, man, if I went to a 125, it'd probably be good for me, because
I really build up that energy.
Yeah, exactly. You have to wring its neck to get it up into the power to pull you up over some of the technical situations. But man, that seems like a lot of work.
250 or 300.
250 or 300.
What you gonna go? What do you think you do? What's the one you have now?
I have a 290.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll probably just do a 300. Why not?
I've got the 250, and it is so completely different than my, enduro 250 bikes.
Right.
Like it has more tractability on that trials bike 250 than any of the 300s I've ever been on, as far as like enduro bikes, because it's got such a different flywheel. Compression is through the roof, like on that bike. Like it's harder to kick a trials bike.
Oh, isn't that
an
crazy,
enduro bike,
dude? Yeah, they're like, you said the a big thing about trials, and this is one of those things that transfers into extreme enduro. Everybody says, when in doubt, throttle out, right? And that's the worst saying ever, specifically for trials. I mean, extreme enduro too, and any enduro riding, honestly, that's a dumb saying. Don't do that. Revving.
Tell us what we need to do then.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody says, when it gets technical, when in doubt, throttle out. And all you're doing is gassing it. You have no momentum, and now you're spinning your tires, so you're going nowhere. Trials teaches you how to use the engine's momentum, the flywheel, to pull you forward. I actually saw a video of Tony Bow practicing on a new Montesa, one of his 4-stroke crazy trials bikes. If you see Tony Bow, if you know who he is, he's the greatest trials rider ever. He had his tire stuffed up against a wall. A stuff is when you put your tire up against the wall, holding the front and rear brake, and the suspension is compressed, and you're completely balanced straight line up against the wall. He's stuffed up against the wall. He revs the throttle, clutch in, shifts up to second or third, revs the throttle full bore, full red line RPM, then lets the throttle off completely, no throttle. Listening to the RPMs drop, right? So whoa, halfway down the RPMs, he lets go of the clutch. So he's giving it no throttle, completely let off on the throttle. RPMs are dropping halfway down. He slips the clutch and jumps up this box. So he used zero throttle. He used all engine momentum.
And zero like forward momentum.
Exactly. Zero forward momentum. Zero throttle. It was all momentum that he built up beforehand with RPM. And learning how to do that's the most extreme version of exactly what I was saying earlier. You're loading your engine to pull you through in a technical situation. In the depth of the technical stuff, when you're in the middle of a gnarly rocky uphill, if you're over revving, you're spinning your tire. Now, on a trials bike, you learn how to use all your throttle beforehand and then slip the clutch, lug the bike so the rear tire hooks up. Learning how to get that traction to the rear tire is the way that these top extreme enduro athletes are so dominant. Graham's ability to put all his traction to the rear tire all comes from trials riding. That's why he's so good.
Wow.
And it's just, he's developed it on the extreme enduro machine. He builds his revs before, and then he lugs the bike. He knows how to get that bike down to the bottom end of the power where he's on the edge of killing the engine. That lug, lug.
And that's why your rock hopping looks and sounds so much different than mine. And I've got to work on that. It's this, I don't know how I'm going to get these types of things, but if you guys stop and think and start watching some of these hard enduro guys, either Rich or Graham or Colton or any of these different people, and you watch them hit these really big rock hops, listen to the way the bike sounds and see how much different it sounds than when I hit it or when you hit it. I'm talking to you, the general listener. Our bikes don't sound like Rich's when we hit those things. They don't sound like Graham's. And our bikes don't do the same thing either because we're using too much throttle and too much just engine power to like slam into things, whereas they're compressing suspension, setting the front tire down on that rock. But while it's coming down, they're building up all this power in the bike with the clutch in and then letting off the throttle and then dumping that power out. And that's awesome. Thank you for shedding light on that.
Yeah,
that's
man.
What's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually, so kind of going back to the IRC thing real quick, I've been working heavily with IRC. We've been doing a YouTube channel as well where I'm putting out a lot of tips on tires, specifically talking about, how to make your tires last the longest, how to utilize your tire to the highest potential, all of that. But also I've been doing a lot of stuff on teaching. I've been putting out a lot of videos on, technical situations, learning how to double blip, learning how to static balance, slow wheelie, all of that stuff, how to get unstuck, all kinds of mistakes that some guys may be making, and things that you should be learning how to do in extreme enduro. I've been putting out a lot of videos on that type of stuff. So if you go to YouTube and put in IRC Moto, I've put a lot of content on specifically technical riding, learning how to do things. And if you watch my double blip video, there's a lot of sound. You can hear how in a double blip, I'm using the first blip of the throttle to get the front tire in the air, and the second blip is all loading RPM. It's loading that flywheel. It's loading that energy down below to get the bike to hop up and over something. A lot of times in these technical situations, you're going to hear these guys hit these sections really heavy on the bottom of the throttle. At the bottom of the technical situation, they're really heavy on the throttle, and then when they're at the top, in the technical situation, going over the big rock, they're hardly giving it any gas. And there's a reason for that. It's all gaining momentum before they're even in the situation.
Yeah, that's what I need to be working on. Well, thank you so much for coming, Rich. It's been just an absolute blast having you back on. How do people get in touch with you? I'll link this down in the show notes, but how do people get in touch with you, and how does that work best?
Yeah, so you can, Instagram's always easy. You can just direct message me, Rich Larsen 511. That's my Instagram handle. I'm always down to do lessons. If you're in the Utah area, shoot. Sometimes I'll even travel Idaho, Nevada. Definitely, I'll probably be heading down to St. George here soon just because of this weather that we're having. But yeah, Rich Larsen 511. Also, if you want to email me, if you don't have Instagram, it's richlarsen511@gmail.com. Always down to set up lessons. And also, I'm constantly putting out content on YouTube on the IRC Moto YouTube channel. So if you just put in IRC Moto, it'll come up. It's IRC Tire USA. It's the Moto channel on their YouTube. We've been seeing a lot of growth. I'm putting out a lot of videos, and I'd love for you guys to check that out and subscribe as well. So.
Yeah, that is some of the best instructional videos on YouTube, and they don't have nearly enough views because there's a lot of people out there that need to learn this stuff. I need to learn it. I need to be watching more of it. I need to just subscribe to it, so I'm actually going to hit the subscribe button right now.
Beautiful.
If you then also you want to make sure that you click the ringing bell icon there so you get notified, because subscribing is not enough. You have to click the bell and say I want to get notified. Rich is putting out some amazing stuff on here. It's not just tires. So go check that out. And take a training ride from him. He's a cool guy. He's not going to intimidate you. He's not going to shame you. He's not going to make you feel bad. He's going to look at the level that you're at, and he's going to say, okay, I'm going to tailor my ride, tailor this day's lesson to this person, which is what makes it so valuable. So that's my plug.
Dude, thank you so much, Kyle, for having me on again, man. It's an honor to be on the channel. Dude, everything you've done, truly, I appreciate it so much. I love the stuff that you're putting out. And again, dude, you're killing the game. I love seeing it.
Okay, thanks, guys. Let's leave a single track.